I'm Lily Carter, 30 years old, living in a small apartment in Austin, Texas. For the past 5 years, I've quietly built a tech company that no one in my family fully knows the truth about. They think I've been wasting my time and talent on some computer fantasy. To them, success means wearing a white coat or sitting in a skyscraper office. No one imagined that the daughter who constantly skipped family meetings was the one behind a digital healthcare platform recently acquired for over $185 million. I never told them, not because I was afraid, but because I got used to the raised eyebrows, the sugary sweet but frost-cold remarks. Tonight is my brother Nathan's engagement party, and I only planned to attend out of courtesy. But something I never expected happened. Sophia, his beautiful and sharp fiancée, in a stunning black dress, looked at me with wide-eyed surprise. "Wait, are you Lily Carter, the founder of MedLink?" I didn't say a word, I just smiled. But inside, I was silently watching the expressions shift on my parents' faces. That moment, when Sophia looked at me not with pity but with genuine awe and admiration, was worth every holiday dinner where I'd been treated like the family failure. I was born in Springdale, a small town known for its perfectly trimmed lawns and academic competitions that mattered more than birthday parties. My family wasn't poor, but they were wealthy in a rigid, unbending way. My father, Charles Carter, was a well-known cardiologist in the region. My mother, Helen, was a legal consultant who had worked with major corporations in Dallas. They beamed with pride over their legacy. My brother, who followed in Dad's footsteps into medicine and had a resume polished to perfection. And me? I once excitedly told them I had just finished building my first website at age 15. Their reaction? "That's cute, honey," my mom said, not even looking up from her iPad. "But don't forget to prep for the SATs. Dad just muttered a vague, uh-huh, then immediately turned to ask Nathan about his summer internship at the major hospital. That was when I learned to stay quiet. In my small room, filled with tangled cords, app sketches, and the dim glow of my monitor, I found myself. I coded from night till morning. I joined programming forums. I studied healthcare tech while my friends scrolled TikTok. They thought I was a little off. Maybe they were right, but I was building something they'd never understand, until it became something they couldn't ignore. And tonight, it was Sophia, the strategic director at one of the top healthcare corporations, who became the first person in the family to see me as more than my brother's shadow. Just one sentence from her shifted the entire dynamic. "Lily Carter is the one who built the system my company just acquired last week?" I didn't need to say anything else. The room went completely still. And in that moment, for the first time in years, I no longer had to prove I belonged. When I was younger, I used to think family dinners were the warmest place on earth. Looking back now, they felt more like board meetings than moments of togetherness. In our oak-paneled kitchen, everyone sat in their assigned seats like reenacting some centuries-old ritual. Dad at the head of the table, Mom to his right, and Nathan, always directly across from me. Like a mirror, I was forced to stare into each day. "This week I scored a perfect grade on my anatomy exam," Nathan would say, placing his paper gently on the table like presenting evidence to the court. My dad, Dr. William Carter, nodded proudly. "That's my boy, still on track for cardiology, right, son?" "Of course," Nathan replied, his confident smile never wavering. My mom, Elizabeth, formerly a legal counsel for a major health insurance firm, would pour more water into Dad's glass. "And Lily?" she'd ask, turning to me with a voice that sounded caring but carried the tone of an evaluation. "Anything you'd like to share?" I'd quickly swallow my spoonful of corn soup and mumble, "I'd just finished an online Python course. I wrote a data processing script. It handles over 1,000 records in under a second." I didn't even get to finish before Dad set his spoon down with a soft clink that seemed to silence the entire table. "Lily," he said slowly, "computers are just tools. Real success doesn't come from typing all day. You need a more solid path." Mom jumped in right away. You're good at debating. You should consider law. Baylor Law offers scholarships for promising young women speakers. I'd heard these lines so many times I could recite them like a sad family anthem. Every time I brought up tech, the conversation either veered off or quickly returned to more important matters: Nathan's academic milestones, medical news, or whatever political headline Mom felt like dissecting that week. No one in my family really cared about the code I wrote, the little apps I experimented with, or the group of students I was mentoring in my after-school programming class. Once, I entered an app development competition for high school students across Texas. I spent nearly 2 months building an app that helped students automatically organize their class schedules, complete with reminders and productivity tracking. I won third place statewide. When I got home, I placed the certificate on the kitchen counter. Nathan glanced at it and asked, "Does this count as an extracurricular for law school applications?" I looked at him but said nothing, because by then I understood. In their eyes, I was just playing around with things. They didn't understand, and didn't care to. When I was 17, I had the chance to meet a programming professor from MIT at a conference in Houston. He reviewed the UI design I had brought and asked immediately, "Where do you study? Would you be interested in a summer internship in my research lab?" I told my mom about it in the car on the way home. She stayed silent for a moment, then said, "Does MIT have a law program? I think you should look into scholarships for promising young female attorneys. As for computers, that can wait." And from that moment on, I stopped telling them things. I learned to hide what excited me. I password protected every personal project. I worked late at night, when the house was asleep, with only the sound of my keyboard echoing like my own heartbeat. When Nathan got accepted to Johns Hopkins Medical School, the family threw a backyard party. A 3-tier cake, tablecloths printed with stethoscopes, a huge banner that read, "The Carter Family's Pride." I watched the celebration from the second-floor balcony, quietly opened my laptop, and typed the final line of code to complete my first app, MedLink Beta, the foundation of the health tech platform now used by hundreds of hospitals across the country. No one knew. No one asked. And I stopped offering. Because from that moment I swore, one day, they wouldn't be able to ignore me anymore. During my senior year of high school, I quietly built an event management software for the student council, a small app that automated the entire registration, staffing, scheduling, and reporting process. Roosevelt High had never had a system like it. When the app was used for the annual science fair, the principal exclaimed, "Lily, you just saved this school nearly 200 hours of manual work. Do you realize how valuable that is?" I smiled faintly and thought, probably not as valuable as Nathan placing his stethoscope on a patient's chest for the first time. At the parent-teacher meeting, the principal deliberately highlighted my achievement to my parents. "Your daughter has immense potential in computer science. We're considering nominating her for the State Innovation Award." My dad nodded politely. My mom smiled, but her eyes were already scanning a flyer about Stanford's pre-law admissions program. On the drive home, she said only, "Don't get too carried away by that kind of stuff, honey. Events come and go, but a law degree or medical license stays with you for life." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, saying nothing, because no words ever seemed enough to make them see me differently. A few months later, I registered for a statewide coding competition where only 3% of the participants were female. I submitted a project called LifeMap, a real-time health data analysis tool for community clinics. I spent my entire winter break coding it on my old laptop, with keys so worn they'd lost their letters. The competition was held in Dallas. I took a 5-hour bus ride by myself, no family, no banners, but I won first place statewide, and the judging panel of software professionals called it a rare breakthrough from a student who hasn't even graduated. I called home at what should have been the most exciting moment of my life. Dad answered. "Dad, I won. I got first place in the statewide coding competition." He paused a few seconds, then said, "Well, will that help you get into Cornell?" I don't remember exactly how I replied. I just remember my hands were freezing, even though it was mid-May. That cold turned into fire. That night, I tore up every Ivy League brochure my mom had made me print. Instead, I applied to schools with top computer science programs. Illinois Tech in Chicago was my first choice. They offered a full-ride scholarship for female students in STEM. I got in. When the acceptance letter arrived, I placed the envelope on the dinner table where my mom was reading the newspaper. She opened it, read the part about the full scholarship, then looked up. You've got to be kidding me. Illinois Tech? Not Harvard, not Stanford? You're going to throw away your future to hang out with keyboard nerds? I didn't respond. But inside, I whispered, No, Mom. I'm choosing my own future. Illinois Tech was a whole new world. No skeptical glances, no sarcastic questions. Here, I wasn't Nathan's little sister or the girl with potential if she'd just listen. I was Lily, the student who always submitted early, the one professors asked to mentor struggling classmates. And then I met Emma Blake. We happened to sit next to each other in integrated health app development. While the rest of the class fumbled to open their projects, Emma had already coded a UI framework. I looked at her and thought, I'm not the only one who wants to change the world with code. Emma didn't talk much, but there was something in her, a purposeful silence, a quiet fire. After class, we walked back to the dorms together. The conversation stretched into the night, circling around hospitals, broken communication systems, and a dream of building something that helped doctors and patients actually understand each other. When my mom was rushed to the ER last year, Emma said, it took 2 hours to transfer her records. In that time, they gave her medication she was allergic to. I swore I'd never let that happen again. I looked at her, not with sympathy but with solidarity. We started sketching a new system, on napkins, on the bathroom mirror, on our laptops at 3 a.m. In a carpetless room, our first dream took shape, MedLink Beta. This time, I didn't tell my family. Not because I was afraid of being mocked, but because I had learned that sometimes silence is your strongest weapon. We called it MedLink, a name born during a sweltering June night while we were buried in a 24-hour cafe next to the dorms. Emma suddenly said, I'm tired of patients being treated like email attachments. They deserve to be connected, not just to their doctors, but to their entire care ecosystem. I looked at the messy whiteboard on our table, arrows linking hospitals to pharmacies, doctors to patients, connections, care, communication. How about MedLink? Emma nodded without hesitation. Sounds like the name of a company that could change the world. From that moment, everything shifted. The outings, the elective classes, the long weekends, all replaced by lines of code, data tables, and test calls to small clinics around Chicago. We rented a garage behind a street in Logan Square. The roof leaked, the walls were moldy, but it was cheap and the landlord agreed to discount part of the rent if we helped maintain his home network. During the day, I worked as a TA for a professor specializing in health data. Emma took freelance UI gigs for a sports startup. At night, we huddled under desk lamps arguing over encryption algorithms and user permission structures. We lived on instant noodles, day-old bread, and reheated coffee. Our savings dwindled, but our will never did. That winter, we launched the first trial version of MedLink. The interface was clunky, the speed was slow, but it had a soul, a platform where doctors could access medical records in 3 clicks, and patients could update their daily symptoms without calling a nurse 10 times. We emailed dozens of clinics, most ignored us, a few declined politely. But then, a small hospital in Joliet unexpectedly called back. We're trying to cut paper costs, their IT manager said, and you're our last shot before we give up. They gave us 3 weeks to prove ourselves. If the system ran smoothly, they'd pay $800 for a 3-month trial. It didn't sound like much, but to us, it was our first real contract. Those 3 weeks were hell, Login errors, server crashes. Some nights, Emma and I didn't sleep, taking turns monitoring error logs. On day 21, I got an email from the hospital. System stable, staff satisfied. We'd like to continue. I printed it and taped it to the wall. Emma cried. A few weeks later, the professor I TA'd for introduced us to Dr. Andrea Walsh, CEO of a network of 12 family clinics. She attended our pitch session with a serious expression and round glasses, quietly watching every slide. At the end of the demo, she said, "I've seen dozens of solutions. You're the first ones to ask me, what do patients need, before asking how much I can pay." She signed a 6-month contract worth $15,000. We used that money to hire a new engineer, Zach, a senior faculty major in cybersecurity who specialized in optimizing system speed. MedLink began to gain momentum. From 1 hospital to 3, then 7, within just 4 months. One March morning, I woke up to find Emma sitting on the floor, eyes glued to her screen. "We've been selected to pitch at Park & Stone's venture round." My heart pounded. Park & Stone wasn't just any investment firm. They had backed 2 healthcare startups that were now listed on NASDAQ. We had just 6 minutes to convince them. In a glass conference room on the 26th floor, surrounded by men in sharp suits, I stood up and told the story of how Emma's mother nearly lost her life due to a medical records error. I didn't talk about code. I talked about why MedLink existed. And Emma closed with a sentence that made the whole room fall silent. "MedLink doesn't build tech. We rebuild the trust that's been lost between patients and the system." 3 days later, we received the confirmation email, an investment of $500,000 for 10% equity. I printed the email, but this time I didn't tape it to the wall. I sent a copy to my parents. They didn't respond, and that was okay. Because I knew the most valuable thing wasn't their reaction. It was the trust of thousands of people who were starting to use MedLink every day. A year after that game-changing pitch, MedLink was implemented in 61 healthcare facilities, from cancer centers in Denver to rural clinics in South Carolina. We were no longer working out of a garage. Our new office was on the 10th floor of a glass building in downtown Chicago. It wasn't massive, but it was enough to house 3 engineering teams, a customer care unit, and 2 data analysts. I still arrived first, every day, usually before 7 a.m. I cherished those early hours when the city was still half asleep, when all I could hear was the coffee machine and the soft glow from the server screens. By then, the name MedLink had begun appearing in health tech journals. One article from Health Tech Now called us the silent game changer. But what sent a chill down my spine was the nickname they gave me. Ghost Genius, the anonymous mastermind who turned the clunky healthcare system into a seamless network. I had never let my photo appear in press kits. In every public speech, I listed Emma as the spokesperson, not because I lacked confidence, but because I wasn't ready to face the people who had once dismissed me, and who might now try to claim credit. My family still didn't fully know what I did. Every holiday when I visited our old house in Springdale, my mom would ask in that flat tone, "You're still working with computers, right? Aunt Cora said her niece works IT at a bank. Great benefits, you know." I'd just nod, smile faintly, change the subject. Once, my dad said, "If you ever want to change paths, Nathan can refer you to the hospital's admin department. Stable job, good insurance, no need to drift around like this." Drift around. I had a pending contract worth $2.5 million. My dev team had just completed AI integration for early detection of cardiovascular complications, and he thought I was drifting, like some unstable freelancer. I had learned not to let words like that hurt anymore. Then one day, a major tech corporation, Viron Health Systems, emailed us with a buyout offer, $30 million. The meeting was held in a luxury conference room in Boston, filled with charts, reports, and growth strategy proposals. They offered to retain Emma and me for 18 months to transition the tech. After we stepped out of the building, Emma turned to me and asked, "Feels like everything we ever dreamed of is on the table." I replied, without hesitation, "It's only a small part of what I want to build." We declined the offer. 2 months later, a call from Blue Peak Ventures changed everything. They offered to invest $12 million for 12% equity, valuing MedLink at over $100 million. For the first time in my life, I sat alone in my office, looking at the investment check with more zeros than I'd ever dared to imagine, and I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt at peace, because I knew I was worthy. With the new backing, we hired 20 more team members, expanded to the West Coast, and began integrating with hospital networks in California. A medical research institute in Berkeley invited us to collaborate on clinical trial infrastructure, but I still kept my habit of avoiding public exposure. No press conferences, no interviews. Only one photo was ever published: Emma beaming beside a MedLink banner, and me, just a quiet silhouette behind frosted glass, my name hastily noted in the caption. At Carter, co-founder, chief technology officer. When Emma asked, "You really don't want to step into the spotlight after everything you've built?" I smiled. Not never, just not yet. And the truth is, I wasn't ready to hear that one sentence again from someone in my family. "You just got lucky." I lived in a small penthouse apartment in Chicago with minimalist furnishings. I still drove the same old Toyota from college. When my mom asked me recently, "Are you planning to apply for a real job? You're almost 30. I just quietly replied, "I'm trying to build something of my own." She nodded, unimpressed. But I didn't need her approval, because every line of code I wrote was helping thousands of patients receive timely diagnoses each day, not stuck waiting in vain. And in a world where silence once felt like my weakness, now I was using it to build something no one could ignore. 3 weeks before my brother's engagement party, my mom called in that suspiciously gentle tone, the kind she only used when she was trying to persuade me to do something I wouldn't like. "Lily, could you dress properly this time, please? There'll be a lot of accomplished guests at the party, and, Sophia's bringing her family too." I frowned. "Who's Sophia?" "Nathan's fiancée. You haven't met her, have you? She works at some tech company in the medical field. Pretty high up. Maybe talking to her will give you some career direction." I gave a soft chuckle. My mom still thought I was an unemployed girl drifting between random programming projects. She still regularly sent me articles like 5 skills to land a help desk job or why women should choose accounting over startups. I didn't argue anymore. Sometimes silence was the best way to protect what you're building. From doubt, from the kind of gaze that shrinks everything you believe in. The engagement party was held at the Willow Garden, an upscale restaurant by the lake just outside Minneapolis. Crystal chandeliers, fresh flowers, pearl-toned satin chairs. Everything screamed perfection, success, and artificiality, down to the last detail. I arrived right on time, in a simple black dress, hair neatly tied, lips barely touched with nude lipstick. As I entered, my mom scanned me from head to toe, then nodded slightly. Not bad this time. Sit next to Aunt Aline, will you? It's been a while since you talked to her." I knew the intention well. Place me in the invisible zone of the event, as far from the center as possible. Nathan walked over, hugged me quickly, then pulled me towards Sophia. "Lily, this is Sophia, my amazing fiancée," he said, pride gleaming in his eyes. "Sophia, this is my sister, Sophia Winters." I recognized her instantly. Not from her warm handshake or polite smile, but because that face was right on the front page of a confidential document I had just read last week. Sophia Winters, head of M&A strategy at Horizon Health, the one currently leading negotiations to acquire MedLink for over $180 million. No way, I told myself. This universe has a wicked sense of humor. Sophia looked at me, paused for a moment. "I'm sorry." She tilted her head. eyes widening as if unlocking a hazy memory. Are you Lily Carter? I nodded. Sophia froze, fingers tightening around her wineglass. You're the founder of Medlink? The fork in my mother's hand clattered onto her plate, a soft metallic sound that somehow cut like a blade. Everyone stopped chewing. Nathan let out an awkward laugh. Sophia, you must be mistaken. She's a freelance programmer. She's not a CEO. But Sophia kept looking at me. Not smiling, not doubting. No, Nathan. I'm not mistaken. I read the internal report. Medlink is the flagship product in Horizon's hospital data integration strategy. The founder is Lily Carter. No photo, no media appearances. But it's her. The entire table froze. My mother clenched her napkin, my father cleared his throat, and downed his drink like he wanted to swallow his embarrassment whole. I placed my hand on the table, not to draw attention, but to steady myself. Yes, I said calmly. Emma Blake and I co-founded Medlink nearly 4 years ago. We currently serve over 300 healthcare facilities nationwide. And yes, I am the CEO. 1 second. 2 seconds. The room felt like it had been vacuumed of all air. Nathan's jaw dropped, his eyes blinked rapidly like he couldn't process the words. You're kidding, right? But why didn't you ever say anything? All these years we all thought you were freelancing. I smiled. Because everyone was too busy thinking that. Sophia whispered, nearly in disbelief. Oh my God, you're the one my team calls the Shadow Founder. They thought you were an anonymous collective. I can't believe it's my fiance's sister. I looked at my mother. She still hadn't spoken. Her eyes shimmered with tears, whether from pride, shock, or regret. I couldn't tell. No one asked anything else, because there was no need. The truth, in that moment, spoke loudly enough. That evening, as people left in awkward conversations and wary glances, Sophia gently touched my arm. You've earned my respect, not because of the numbers, but because you stood your ground in a family like that. I smiled softly. And you've made it impossible for me to keep hiding. The morning after the engagement party, I got a text from my mom at 7:14 a.m. Brunch at the Birch Cafe, 10 o'clock. We need to talk. No emoji, no exclamation point, just 6 words, cold as early morning mist covering a lake. I knew the meeting was unavoidable. And maybe, after all these years, I no longer wanted to avoid it. The Birch Cafe was where my mom usually took clients for business chats. Not too noisy, not too casual, and crucially, with private rooms. When I arrived, both my parents were already seated. They were dressed like they were about to hold a press conference, formal, tidy, and clearly trying to project calm. You're here, my mom said, her voice unusually soft. My dad began, Lily, last night took us by surprise, but also made us very proud. I sat down, looked directly at the 2 people who once devoured my confidence with judging eyes. I didn't feel angry anymore, just a quiet kind of exhaustion, the kind you only feel when you've gone too far for too long to bother turning around. I didn't think last night was the right time to explain, I said slowly. But if today is the chance, then I'd like to be clear about everything. Mom nodded. Of course. We're family. You should have shared sooner. I smiled, a smile without bitterness, just clarity. I didn't share because every time I tried, you all made me feel like I was wrong. Dad leaned forward, trying to appear understanding. We just wanted what's best for you, Lily. Your choices at the time weren't clear, but we always knew you had potential. I shook my head. No, Dad, you didn't know. You didn't see. You just saw I wasn't Nathan, so you assumed I was lost. The air in the room thickened. My mom tightened her grip on her teacup. Do you remember when I won that statewide coding competition? I called home so excited, hoping to be celebrated, but all you asked was whether I was applying to Harvard. Mom jumped in almost instinctively. You were so young then. How could you? No, Mom, I interrupted, gently but firmly. It's exactly those little things that made me grow up in silence. My dad stared at me for a long moment. Then he spoke, voice nearly hoarse. I'm sorry. I froze. For the first time in my life, that man, the one who once declared, being a doctor is the only respectable career, had said those words. No detours, no dressing it up as an excuse. Lily, my mother said, her eyes beginning to well up, you have every right to be upset with us. But we never meant to belittle you. We just didn't understand you, and maybe that's why we chose the easiest way out. Denial? I nodded gently. I know, and I don't hold it against you anymore. Because if you hadn't doubted me, maybe I wouldn't have had to go so far to truly find myself. That afternoon, Nathan showed up at my apartment unannounced. In his hands was a box of strawberry cupcakes, my childhood favorite. No wine, he said with a soft smile. Just cupcakes and an apology. I invited him in. We sat on the balcony, overlooking the amber dusk slowly settling over the streets of Chicago. I don't really know what to say, Nathan began, because honestly, I never really knew who you were. Not because you hid it, but because I never asked. I stayed quiet. The strawberry cupcake still tasted just as sweet as it did when I was 10. You're more brilliant than I ever imagined. No, more brilliant than anyone in the family ever imagined. I always thought I was the trailblazer, the one the family was proud of, but it turns out the one who walked quietly through the dark was the strongest of all. His words didn't bring tears, they brought peace. You never asked if I was happy with what I do, I said. Never asked what I needed, other than a respectable job. I know, Nathan nodded. And I was wrong. We sat in silence for a long time. No explanations needed. Sometimes, acknowledgement doesn't have to be long, just honest. A few days later, my mother sent me an article. 5 female founders under 35 reshaping U.S. healthcare. My name was listed as number 3. A short note was attached. Great article. I printed it out for Grandma to read. You did something amazing, Lily. For the first time, she didn't say, you've done it. She said, you did it. And I realized it's never too late to start understanding each other, even in the same old family. After that fateful night, I didn't expect any miracles. I didn't hope for my parents to suddenly grasp every silent battle I had fought. Nor did I dream of becoming the pride of Mom's tea group. But the surprise was, they began to change. Slowly, very slowly, but just enough for me to notice that some walls only fall when the person on the other side learns to place their hand on them, not to push, but to listen. My father, the same man who once brushed off my first programming win, unexpectedly sent me an email. The subject line had just one word: understanding. In the message, he asked how MedLink integrated with existing clinical reporting systems. Would it help reduce prescription errors? Could older nurses use it easily? I read that email 4 times, not because it was long, but because it was the first time he had asked with genuine curiosity. And my mom? She started sending me articles about women in tech. Each link came with a small note. Interesting read. Do you relate to her? No more comparisons. No more, why can't you be like your cousin, or Nathan's fiancé already has her MBA. Just simple words. Admitting I was someone they never really understood, but were now trying to learn. From scratch. And no one made that process more clear than Sophia. From a stranger I met at an engagement party, she slowly became the bridge between 2 worlds, the rigid Carter family and Lily Carter, the woman who once chose silence as a form of self-defense. In Horizon Health and MedLink meetings, Sophia always introduced me with a line that sent chills down my spine. And this is the person to whom we owe a better future in healthcare. Not CEO, not co-founder, but an acknowledgement so simple and because of that incredibly powerful. The acquisition of MedLink was finalized that spring. $185 million, a number I once thought only appeared in Monday morning tech newsletters. But what made me take a deep breath wasn't the number, it was the clause that came with it. I would continue to lead MedLink as an independent unit under Horizon, with full control over product, personnel, and strategic direction. They didn't buy me out to dim the light, they invested in it to help it shine further. For the first time in years, I agreed to appear publicly in the media. The exclusive Forbes Health Tech interview ran with a photo of me standing on the rooftop of the MedLink building, the autumn sky of Chicago behind me. My eyes looked straight into the lens, no hesitation, no fear. The bold headline read, "Lily Carter, the woman redrawing the map of U.S. medical data." My mother printed the article, framed it in wood, and placed it on the living room shelf, right next to Nathan's medical school diploma. I didn't ask. She didn't explain. There was no need. Nathan and Sophia moved closer to Horizon's headquarters. Dinner between the three of us slowly became a tradition, no longer tense negotiations, but genuine, relaxed time together. Nathan no longer hesitated to ask about AI, user interface, or even the behavioral analytics algorithms MedLink was testing. One evening, as he studied my reporting dashboard, he quietly said, "You've done something the medical industry has thought impossible for decades." I turned to him and smiled softly, because I wasn't bound by that belief of impossible. I still live in that same penthouse apartment, even though I could now buy a whole block. MedLink opened a new branch in California. We launched pilot programs in Europe and Singapore, with Sophia acting as our liaison. But what makes me happiest isn't the revenue reports. It's a new report from a major hospital in Ohio. Prescription errors dropped by 41% after 3 months of using MedLink. That number was the answer to all those years of doubt, not just for my family, but for my 17-year-old self, who once thought she was lost. Every now and then, my mom still calls, her voice gentle. "Any new hospitals start using MedLink today?" I'm not surprised anymore. I just reply, "Yes, Mom, and it's only the beginning." One afternoon in mid-April, as the last snow melted on Chicago's sidewalks, I stood in the lecture hall of a small public high school on the outskirts of Aurora, looking out at rows of bright-eyed dreamers. "What do you think," I ask, "when people say girls don't belong in tech?" A hand shot up. A curly-haired girl in the front row said, "I think that's old news. Girls can do anything now." The class burst into applause. I laughed, unable to hide how moved I was. "Exactly," I nodded. "But sometimes, to do everything, you first have to learn to believe in yourself, even when no one else does." I've been hosting mentoring sessions like this for the past 2 years. Not for publicity, not to promote MedLink, but because I remember myself, the 15-year-old who hid lines of code in her math notebook, who cried when someone told her computers were just toys. I spent too many years trying to prove something to other people, to my parents, to society, to my own insecurities. But eventually I realized success isn't a shield. It's a mirror. And that mirror has to reflect who you are, not who others want you to be. MedLink continues to grow, but I no longer race toward numbers. Now, every morning, I read feedback from end users, not investors, but the residents charting patient notes at 3 a.m., the single mom trying to access her child's immunization record with a single tap. Someday, I may step down as CEO, but the mission won't step away from me. And I know the most beautiful thing I'll ever leave behind isn't an app or a company, but a quiet, firm belief for the next generation that you can. This past summer, I received a handwritten letter from a 13-year-old girl named Ruby, living in Iowa. I saw your TED Talk. I like coding too, but the boys in my class say I'm just showing off. Has anyone ever said that to you? And how did you get past it? I sat still with that letter for over an hour. Then I wrote back, by hand, one word at a time. Yes, I've been told that. More than once. But every time it happened, I wrote another line of code. Each line was a quiet act of resistance, silent but unshakable. And in the end, those lines built a world they could no longer deny. I included a notebook with the cover printed, Code Like a Girl. I still keep in touch with my parents, but I no longer try to make them proud. Now I just want them to truly see me, not as a shadow of expectations or some fixed mold, and somehow, it feels like they finally do. Lately, my mom has gotten pretty good at using her iPhone. She sometimes sends me pictures of articles about women in tech, followed by, "Do you know this person?" I don't always respond, but one time I replied, "No, Mom, but I hope someday someone asks that question about me." Looking back, from that dinner where I was dismissed, to the first contract worth $800, to the moment Sophia recognized me at the engagement party, it feels like watching a film. But unlike the movies, I don't need a grand finale. I just want peace with the choices I've made. If once upon a time I dreamed my parents would pat my shoulder and say, "You were right," now all I want is to be able to look at the girl in the mirror each morning and say, "You chose the hard path, but you never gave up, and because of that, you won." I am Lily Carter. I used to be the girl my family called the unstable one, the sister who got seated at the far end of the table, the founder no one ever saw. But today, I am simply myself. No labels, no need to prove anything. Just true to who I am and paving the way for those who come next. If you've ever been underestimated for dreaming big, if you've ever been laughed at for starting from nothing, remember, you are not alone. And sometimes, it's that steady silence that will make the whole world finally listen. Thank you for following Lily's story. If you see a part of yourself in this journey, leave a comment, share your story, or send this to someone who might need a quiet spark to keep believing in themselves. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt stories about family and resilience.